Thank you for joining us today for this webinar on why multifamily design is getting complicated in Calgary. I'm Layla and I will be guiding the conversation today, but our real experts are Brett Ellergodt and Chris Hill from Ellergodt Design. Brett is a very seasoned residential designer and owner of Ellergodt Design. Chris Hill is a senior lead designer with deep expertise in the City of Calgary's bylaws, with a strong track record in custom home and multifamily design. They have both been helping their clients navigate everything from renovation and custom home design to multifamily developments. And they are here today to share what's really happening behind the scenes as Calgary's housing landscape evolves. We would love to hear what you think of this webinar. Please feel free to drop any questions in the chat. Brent and Chris, thank you both so much for being here. Let's jump in. So my first question, and Chris, I would actually want you to answer this question first, is Chris, if you could sum up multifamily housing in Calgary in one word, what would it be and why did you choose that word?
I would say evolving. There's new rules, there's new zoning. It brings a lot of new ideas to the table when you look at different housing types. So I think it's really an evolving time right now in the city of Calgary.
Really succinct answer. I appreciate that. Brent, could you be as succinct with that response?
Probably not, but I'm going to try. We're also seeing a greater divide between our clients, the developers typically, and the community members, and just with their different opinions on what should be built next to them.
What are these opinions? Like, what is the difference?
A lot of times developers, if they're the landowners, they know what the bylaws and policies are, and they expect to be able to build a fourplex or whatever it might be, and then there's neighbors who don't want that next door to them.
Oh, so you're saying that part of the design process can be like kiboshed a little bit by neighbors having specific preferences?
Right. There is an appeal process right at the end of the development permit process where if the city approves a development permit, the individual can appeal the decision by the city, and that can complicate, obviously, the process of a development permit being released and construction moving forward.
So that could stall out the project from a time perspective?
From a time perspective, and then ultimately from a project moving forward, if the appeal board accepts the appeal.
Oh, wow. That could be a big problem.
Absolutely.
And no wonder the multifamily situation in Calgary is getting more complicated.
Yes.
Next question for both of you. We will start with Chris again. What are some of your priorities that are on the radar for you with regards to multifamily housing here in Calgary?
One of my biggest priorities is thinking about the end user. I think a lot of times investors will come in trying to make these developments happen, and they're making the dollars work on paper when I really want to focus on the end user and the tenant. How do they live on a day-to-day basis? What amenities do they need inside and out of the building? And making sure that it fits into the community and it's somewhere that people want to live.
Why is that important that it's somewhere for people wanting to live? You're working with the landlord who wants to get as much rent as possible. I'm not going to paint the sleazy landlord picture, but at the end of the day, that's a business process.
Yeah.
You're really talking about you want to connect with the people, you want to make people's living better. Why is that so important for you?
I think at some stage of our lives, we've all been a renter, and we've probably all lived in a space that isn't totally ideal or really what we need for our certain lifestyle. So I think it doesn't matter if you're a homeowner or a renter, the space should really work for you and be comfortable.
I couldn't agree more. I've lived in some pretty interesting spots myself. I remember one time I was living in university, actually. We had this apartment, and there was a pipe in the wall that was about the size of a Tim Hortons cup. And there was a Tim Hortons cup stuck in it. So one day I got curious, and I took the Tim Hortons cup out, and it was just a hole straight into the outside of the house. So
Wow.
It was very cold in that area.
Not great. Yeah.
Not ideal renter situation. Brent, what about you? What is your top priorities right now? What's on your radar with multifamily homes?
Because one of my main responsibilities is helping a client right at the beginning of the process, not, I guess, in the sales, but answering their questions. I want to really be helping a client understand what they really can do on their lot or property and set that expectation as soon as possible.
And do you see that sometimes clients I want this humongous house and 25 bedrooms in it, and that's not possible with the lawn or the shape?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think, again, sometimes clients or potential clients can go to the bylaws online and read what they want to read, or read maybe allowable lot coverage or number of units. but not read all the details that go with it. And that's, I think, where we can help out and contribute and help them understand what's really buildable for their development.
I imagine that would take a lot of expertise. How did you learn how to assess a property and see really what is actually possible and what's actually feasible?
A lot of that's just years of experience, but I've got to admit, I have really good staff. I've got really good designers with great knowledge of the bylaws and the policies. And to be honest, I rely on them heavily. I've been doing this for a lot of years, but in the last few years, I've tapered back from the design side to almost nothing. And I've got amazing staff that have taken over that side of things, and they do assist me in helping our clients understand what certain properties are capable of when it comes to development and that sort of thing.
So there's a big level of education when you're working with a client.
Absolutely. Yeah. Some of our clients are experienced developers, but they still will send us an address and say, hey, brand staff, help us understand what we can do. And just today, I had one of our developers email an address, and when Chris and I reviewed it, it became obvious that through the policy, it was not, like a multifamily was not possible on that site, even though it was zoned RCG, which is generally a multifamily designation. So again, prior to a builder, a investor, or a developer buying a property, we can help them understand what is really possible for that specific lot.
So let's just say I was a new developer and I was like, okay, I'm going to purchase my first plot of land. Would you say it's best practice to come and connect with someone like your team and say, hey, what can we actually do with this land before I decide to purchase it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes people will need to put an offer in, have a conditional sale where they are saying, I need 3 weeks for due diligence. That's good so they can possibly tie down the lot. But then we still need a couple weeks to do our due diligence and help a client understand. That way then a client has the rights to that lot in a way through the purchasing process. But they can also pull out just in case that something isn't working out. Like it's maybe their pro forma says they have to have 4 units with 4 secondary suites, and that's the only way they're going to have a good return on investment. We can also let them know it's only 3 units or 3 and 3. Then they can pull out. I haven't lost money or purchased this and not lost money and now got to sell it again and possibly for a loss.
That would not be good.
Not good at all.
Nobody wants losses in business.
No.
Brent, I'll throw it back to you for this next question as well. And we know we're on the topic of types of design. What design trends are you seeing? What shifts in the market? What are people wanting nowadays when they're looking to develop a multi-purpose home or a multifamily home?
I'd say usually people are looking for maximum number of units. So that's one of the biggest things. Like they want maximum lot coverage, so they want the units to be as big as possible and the most amount of units possible.
Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think it's good that it's shifting that way?
I think there's 2 aspects to that. One is like what Chris just mentioned about the end user, the renter, the person who's coming in. And sometimes with maximizing units, you find that, especially say in the secondary suite, it's getting so small, it's like a studio apartment, or the rooms are so small, we question whether a bed will fit in them. So there's that kind of side where maximum units isn't always the ideal. And that's, again, where we can help them out. And right from the beginning or as we get into design to enlighten them on what is possible. And sometimes they will pare back and do not the right thing, but maybe the appropriate thing for the end user instead of just looking at the return on investment and what they can rent each unit for.
Okay. Chris, what about you? What trends are you seeing? What are people wanting?
They want everything. They want creativity. They don't want the budget that goes with it. They're asking for the moon. We can't always deliver that. But Brent said, trying to max everything out as big as possible, as many doors as possible. That's the trend we see with investors. And that's typically who is building these multifamily developments right now, is individuals or group-like investors who come in and are really just looking at the numbers and they're reacting to that, and that's what they come asking for, is to maximize everything.
It's so interesting that you say that, because from just this brief conversation, it would seem like that is the antithesis to what your priorities are, the end unit. How do you balance that?
I think we just have to be honest with them from the get-go. When we sit down and we do our design kickoff meetings, it's a chance to go through our design questionnaire with these clients, determine what they're looking for out of the property, and there's always things that they don't foresee as part of the process. So I try to make them aware of those items, and I stress the importance of them. If I don't do that, then I'm allowing things to fall through the cracks, really, and get those developments that aren't totally ideal for people.
That's very fair. On that note of doing your due diligence, there's different areas of the city, and different areas have different things going on. What area do you think, or what neighborhood do you think is really telling the story of how the city has been changing?
I think it's Banff Trail. So yeah, so Banff Trail is in a fantastic location, inner city northwest. It's close to major LRT stops. It's close to University of Calgary. It's not too far from SAIT. Major employment hubs like Foothills Medical Center, Alberta Children's Hospital. The location is just great for Banff Trail. So we're seeing many different types of developments go in, whether it's single family, single detached, row houses, walk-up apartment buildings. They're all happening next to each other. So it's a melting pot of housing types in the city. It's not always welcomed by the communities or community members. So it's really up to us to try to put a intentional design and development proposal forward that hopefully the community and our client can get on board with and be happy with.
It's interesting that you say that because I live very close to that area. I live in Kennington. We often go to dinner in that apartment development that's happening right behind the hospital. And there's so many new restaurants there. There's new shops. There's a Safeway. That area has blossomed in the last couple of years in a way that when we first saw that construction, we were all those apartments are going in. It's just going to be mayhem.
Yep.
That's a lovely area. And now my partner and I love to spend time in that area. I also think they've really designed that area well with the out exterior design. There's parks, there's places to sit, there's an ice rink. And I think when you pair your ideology of wanting to benefit the end user while also saying how much money can we actually make, I think that's a beautiful line to walk because I think you create really amazing designs. Now, I'm not a designer and I am certainly not an architect, so take everything I say with a grain of salt, but I can really, as a member of the community, appreciate the thought process that you're bringing to the design process.
Thanks. We try.
I think you guys are doing a great job.
Yeah.
I think you guys are off on the right foot. Turning that question back to Brent, what's your favorite neighborhood? What neighborhood is really changing for you in Calgary?
I was thinking to the first multifamily project I designed. It was in Marda Loop. And back then there was just almost only single families. I'm not saying mine was the first fourplex in Marda Loop. At that point, there was just, I think, one street that allowed the multifamily. Now, what I love about Marda Loop is it's a very diverse community. It's a community that has like the 4 or 5 story apartment buildings, like pretty brand new condos, apartment buildings along 33rd. And the city's allowed that, which I think is really important. Obviously, it's densified, brought in a lot of people to the community, which again helps local businesses do well. There's a Blush Lane, there's a corner store, there's another apartment building there. There's like Phil and Sebastian's and the Shoppers Drug Mart, places that have totally changed from when I was growing up in Calgary many years ago. And I just think that's a really diverse and vibrant community because it's got so much variety to it, from single family to larger multifamily projects. And then even from a business perspective, it's very walkable. You can go from a convenience store, which I think is 7-Eleven, to a huge range of restaurants. It's got our favorite Vietnamese restaurant there, I think they moved down to 17th Ave. But anyway, they used to be there, and it's just a great place to get into. All the development that's parking and driving around isn't great, but when it's done, it will be an amazing community.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
another great community here in the city.
Absolutely.
On that note, so you said Marda Loop was the first multifamily project that you did.
Correct.
How does that project differ from the current multifamily projects that you're doing?
Part of that, the road that we were doing the development on was very small lot. So it's a 50 by 80 lot. So that was very challenging to fit 4 units on there. But we did it, which was great, and I think it was a success. Back then, though, that most of the developments, or all the developments we've done along that road on 34th have been for sale. And so I think that's where things are changing drastically over the last few months, is so many of our projects are now for rent and not for sale.
So they're for rent by the people who are developing them.
That's correct. Yeah,
And so these people are not looking to sell them off, they're not flipping it.
correct.
It's really changed to now they're renting out these units and they're hanging on to them.
Yeah, I think developers used to look at property development as not a quick buck, but that was their business model, was developing, finding properties with potential, developing them, whether it was single family, semi-detached or multi, and then just selling them and moving on. Now I think a lot of developers and investors are looking for long-term investments. So they're looking at something to say, I want to hold on to this for 10, 20, 30 years. Some people talk about the legacy, even having their kids own them down the road. So I think there's a real change towards that attitude of long-term versus the, not old school, but would have been the past when developers were trying to make the money short-term and then looking for another project and just moving on to the next community or property.
I can imagine that kind of old school mentality led to a very like boom and bust situation for developers and for the housing market in general here in Canada.
Yeah.
This is totally not on the question list, but I'm just curious to ask it myself. How do you think this new wave of developers hanging on to these rental properties and having these rental properties exist for multi-generations, how do you think that will change the housing crisis here in Canada?
Oh, well, my goal is to be a part of that, to help bring density and more rental units. I think we as a vibrant city need that, and I think that's what I'm excited about in our company and working with our developers and investors is providing that service that allows them to not just density but a range. Obviously we need to have units that are for sale because some people can afford it or want to invest. Others they might be in Calgary for 2 years or only can afford a rental, and we need to provide those kind of developments as well.
It sounds very positive overall.
I think so, yeah. I think we're heading in the right direction. There's always little things that we can improve, but yeah, generally I think the City of Calgary is providing the rezoning that often does contribute to a higher density.
That's great to hear. It
Yeah.
sounds very positive for Calgary in the next 10, 15, 20 years.
I think so,
I think
yeah.
it's a great city to live in.
It is, it's amazing.
Awesome. Back to you, Chris. We just spoke to Brent and briefly touched on the first project that he did as a multifamily home and now what he's designing. I'm interested to hear from your perspective. What was your first project and how is it different from the current multifamily homes that you're designing?
Similar to Brent, I think it was a 4-unit row house on a corner. Those were the first types of multifamily that you'd start to see in the inner city. Lately, we're finding there's more larger tracts of land being put together. So not only owning the corner, but maybe 1 or 2 lots in from the corner as well. So some of these developments are upwards of 6, 8, or even 10 units on the land. You just get into more space planning and really thinking about the end user again, the amenity spaces that you're providing in these types of developments. But essentially, it's just gotten larger.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And why do you think that it's gotten larger over the years? Is that just different zoning? Is that developers are bringing more money in?
I think there's a lot of factors. I think zoning certainly plays a big part in that. The city allowing developers to come in and build that type of development. I also think there's financing opportunities for these developers. CMHC has preferred financing as long as they meet certain criteria, and it can make it very financially beneficial for them to come in and build these types of larger developments.
I would add that I'm finding that some of the investor groups are larger. There's more people becoming a partnership, and that it just allows them to be, instead of a mom and pa or father son or whatever the scenario might be, I met with someone yesterday that was, I think, 5 or 6 people that were pooling their money, and that just means that, yeah, that maybe they can afford a larger parcel of land or do a larger development than a smaller group.
That's an interesting trend. So you would say in the past, the multifamily homes were really these mom and pop, father, son, more family-oriented investing groups, but now you're seeing they're more like business partnerships almost.
Yeah, I wouldn't say more, but at least that category is being added to it, where I think people are seeing the opportunities that are out there in either for sale or long-term rental properties. And in order to maybe compete with other developers or investors purchasing land, they realize they maybe need to have more money available or having financing or cash available versus sometimes when you're purchasing a lot, you have to put in an offer, get your financing, and sometimes you can lose a property if you don't have the briefcase of cash, which I don't have, but I'm glad some of our clients do.
Hey, it's not bad to have clients who have briefcases of cash.
Sounds good to me.
As a business owner myself, I love seeing those clients walk through the door. On that note, talking about these new clients who want to develop these multi-family projects, what do you think, and let's start with Brent on this one. What do you think is the biggest surprise that these people are learning once they come? You're coming to them and you're dropping that surprise on the table. What's the most common surprise?
I think it's when they ask me, what's your process? And then right after that's typically, and how long does that take? So our process was the design taking them through the design process and then applying for the development permit. So they feel like the design process takes too long, even though, like Chris said, we really focus on the quality and not speed. So that's sometimes either disappointing or doesn't fit within their timeline. And then how long the development permit takes through the city's planning department's process. And that seems like it takes longer and longer. And I think it's just because of the volume the city is working through these days. But that can be maybe not disappointing, but very time consuming, just waiting and waiting while it's in the city and they're waiting for their review and feedback and answering our questions and that sort of thing.
Nobody likes to play the waiting game, right?
No.
But we all must do it at different points.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's an important part for you guys to make sure that all the... Have you ever, this is an interesting question, it's totally off the cuff again. Have you ever seen someone who's gone ahead and started building without approvals from the city and have that come back to bite them in the butt?
Oh, yes. I think Chris would probably be the best person to talk to there because I think it was one of his projects.
Every once in a while, you have someone who thinks that time is not on their side and they try to find any advantage they can. So in a recent example, we hadn't even received the complete development permit in hand, and they had gone and applied for the building permit and started some groundwork. So digging the hole, getting some concrete in the ground. It didn't really work out for them too well. They ended up getting a stop work order and needed to stop. So time equals money. So yeah, every once in a while you have somebody trying to push the envelope. It's never something we recommend, but people don't always take our advice.
All you can do is offer the advice.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
Back to the original question, Chris. What is the biggest surprise that you're seeing with your clients?
Probably the biggest thing are the finer details. Whether it's a bylaw, height concerns, or things we talked about are mobility storage, bike storage. Where do your garbage bins go? So when they try to maximize these sites, they don't know about those smaller items that make a big deal to the end user. So it's really the finer details that they sometimes aren't aware of and not trip them up, but catch them by surprise a little bit. And there's a bit of a learning curve there with that too. So they understand the importance of what we're trying to do and of those finer details.
I can't blame them. I'm always surprised when I have to go figure out where my trash cans are.
Yeah.
It's quite windy last night. Garbage cans were down the road. So one of the themes that we've been touching on throughout this podcast is that multifamily homes and the multifamily projects that are coming through are getting more complicated. What do you think are the key factors that are increasing the complication level?
Right now, a recent example would be some policies that don't necessarily align with the land use bylaw. So our land use bylaw has been in place for maybe 15 or more years right now. It gets updated from time to time. But just recently, the city has implemented new policy plans called local area plans. And they are overarching documents that guide the bylaw below them. And these local area plans they went through public consultation and their process, but they didn't align them terribly well with the existing land use bylaw. So we see conflict between those two documents. So that's probably one of the biggest hurdles we're seeing on a technical level right now.
It's just you don't know which document to follow.
You got to follow both, right? So there's the catch. So an example of that is I had a client with 2 properties in Southwest Calgary, and they wanted a multifamily development, and this was going to be a sale project for them. Their land use described the property as being able to hold upwards of 8 units on the property. But the newly implemented local area plan restricted them to only 4. So there was a large disconnect between the local area plan and the land use bylaw. Ultimately, the local area plan is the overarching document, so it negated the zoning and what we were allowed to do according to the land use bylaw. It eventually made the project unfeasible for the landowners, and they're sitting in limbo right now trying to figure out what to do next.
That is an extremely unfortunate situation.
It is, absolutely. A lot of these people who own these properties are renting them out, and then when they get rid of their tenants, it's now sitting empty and sitting in limbo, essentially waiting for the city process to work its way through And unfortunately, it hit a major roadblock here. So they're back to square one.
So it's not just the document, there's all of these problems that are coming out of this one issue. So the developer can't move forward. That means the properties are sitting empty. Space in Calgary where we could house people is just sitting there and they can't get tenants in there. And then we come back to the time factor, time is money. How long are these people waiting for? Are these the type of projects that make developers leave that role?
Potentially. These landowners have quite a few doors in the city, so they're playing a patient game. It's been over 8 months that the project has been stalled out. City Council was asked to go back and revise the local area plans to bring them more in line with existing land use bylaws, and Council voted that down. They said these local area plans will stay in place. That was a commitment they made to the communities when these were established. It's going to be years before anything can change around the local area plans. We do have a new land use bylaw coming in next year, which hopefully is addressing most of those issues. And maybe we can readdress it next year, but we're still talking years of waiting. So it is a very long-term game.
From a developer perspective, that must be very difficult. And it must be difficult for you guys as well to have your clients just sitting there in limbo.
It can be frustrating for everybody. We want projects to move forward. They want projects built. And there's not much we can do sometimes. So we advise them as best that we can. And sometimes it just doesn't work out. A lot of the time it does, though. We'll find a way.
That's good to hear. I appreciate that. Brent, Chris really touched on the regulatory factors that are increasing the complexity of these multifamily projects. Are there any other factors like availability, demand, infrastructure? What is your thoughts on it?
Yeah. Definitely, we've seen investors and developers come to us in a hurry to get feedback on a lot because there is demand for the lot. So there's other people, maybe the realtors are setting up a scenario where when 1 week you make an offer and then we just pick the purchaser, that puts people under pressure, right? So that means should I just pull the trigger and purchase this lot or not? So I think that there still is a demand. I've heard out there that some developers and builders are selling off lots, but I think generally there's still quite a big demand for good lots that are developable. Yeah, I think that's one of the big ones is demand right now for land and finding the appropriate land. And that's the problem is people may go onto my property on the City of Calgary website, type in an address. It tells you everything from when your garbage pickup is and that sort of thing. There's a previous development permits and building permits on it, but the most important for us is seeing what the zoning is. But again, people might look at that zoning and look up the zoning under the bylaws and say, oh, I can put a fourplex on here. But again, like Chris said, that is not guaranteed. You really have to make sure you look at that other overarching policy that seems to supersede it and make sure that those two are in alignment and that you're purchasing the right lot.
It really, and from my conversation with both of you, the level of experience that goes into developing these properties effectively and on budget seems quite immense. This is not something that you can just throw into ChatGPT and have ChatGPT do it.
And again, this is kudos to my staff because they're the ones that are really in this day to day, just each project reviewing those bylaws, making sure that a change maybe didn't happen a week or two before, reviewing those policies, because obviously we take a lot of responsibility and pride in advising and helping our clients design and build the right kind of developments, not just for the end user, like Chris mentioned, but also maximize their return on investment. But we don't want to submit something just because a client likes it or it's pretty or it has maximum units or whatever, when really we know it's not going to be approved by the city. Chris said there's really a balance there that we want to be providing that level of expertise. And yeah, I think the policies definitely brought in another level of complexity, but I try to avoid the bylaws. It's kind of like the building code. I try not to look at that often. It's like this legal documents that don't make much sense to me, but I'm glad that I have really great staff that are always keeping abreast of them and keeping in touch with city planners and that sort of thing on specific projects, and keeping ahead of that level of knowledge it takes a lot of time. And again, like I said, I'm privileged to have such experienced designers on my team.
It really is such a great experience when you have people that you can rely on and people that you can trust.
Absolutely, yeah.
We've come back to the topic of zoning quite a bit. How have you seen the City of Calgary's approach to zoning evolve over the past several years?
It seemed like before the blanket rezoning that I think everyone's aware of, I think it was August, September, October when that sort of finally got implemented. Prior to that, there was lots more zone, like most of the city of Calgary was, at least in the single family areas, was RC1 or RC2. And then like Chris said,
What are RC1 and RC2?
oh, sorry, yes, RC1, thank you. RC1 is generally a single family home can be placed on that lot. RC2 was typically a semi-detached, so either two single families or the semi-detached being two units, two homes stuck together. And then there were other ones like MC1, I can't remember, MC1, MC2, and those were multifamily. So a few years ago, people in the industry approached the city and said, we need some more multifamily, maybe not these huge apartment buildings, but something in the middle there. And that's when the city of Calgary, with some industry people, created the RCG, which was, again, typically, like Chris said, for his first multifamily project, they were really focused for corner lots. So it's like you're not impacting as many people by approving a multifamily on a corner. There's one home that's being affected by it, but not like doing a mid-block like we're doing now. So that you'd see, like, for example, when I drive down 20th Ave Northwest, there was, a few years ago, there was quite a few of these fourplexes being built on the corners. And then when RCG was brought in and they were allowed, or when the blanket rezoning happened, though that happened obviously on every lot, and then we were, as an industry, trying to figure out how do you do these on the mid-block lots, not just the corner lots.
Okay. So a lot more things happening in the rezoning then.
Absolutely.
So do you feel like the City of Calgary is becoming more open to different zoning types?
I think the City of Calgary has a great planning department. I think that's what planners do, is they're planning 5, 10, 20, 50 years in advance, whether it's the roads, whether it's densification, where to industrial areas happen and where residential. Kudos to them. That's what they're great at. I could never plan that far ahead. And I think they are planning for a growing city. So I think they're doing a great job. I think it takes a lot of work and a lot of expertise that I don't have, and I'm glad they're doing it.
That's a great sentiment to have trust in your city officials.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, generally. And overall, the City of Calgary Planning Department is amazing. They're very collaborative. They typically, when we work on a project with them, they are giving us suggestions. They're working with us because they seem to also want to have development move forward. They also are the middleman between the industry and the public. And that's a hard job, to be able to keep as many people happy as possible, and can't just be on the industry or can't just be on the neighbor, right? There's got to be a balance of our city moving forward in a positive direction as a growing city versus just spreading out into suburbia.
Chris, would you agree with that? With regards to the Calgary City Planning Department?
Absolutely. They're willing to work with us all the time. Sometimes they're hard to get a hold of, but they're just busy. There's so many developments going on right now. Working with the city department is typically an easy process. Communication's always open, email, phone calls, those types of things. So yeah, I would back that up.
And how do you feel about how their approach to zoning has evolved over the last few years?
I think now, thinking about the new land use bylaw coming in, I think their approach is starting to change a little bit. I think they're trying to simplify the land uses. Right now, there are many different land use types, even just within residential or multi-residential development. And they're trying to narrow that down. So I think they understand the complexity of the housing types, and they're also listening to the communities too. They definitely hear the community associations and the general public when they are opposing a development or raise concerns about it. So I think by simplifying the land use bylaw, they're trying to make the process easier and maybe create less friction between the community and the developer.
Can you share a time where you've had like a real world problem with zoning or policy laws, or where they brought in an unexpected challenge for a project? I believe you had 2 consecutive properties in southwest of Calgary. You guys designed a multifamily development with 6 units spread over 2 buildings. The zoning of the property could easily allow for that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, that was the southwest property we talked about earlier. That definitely was a speed bump and is now a brick wall.
This is an interesting question about the public. We've talked about the city of Calgary being the in-between the industry and the public. Are you seeing any specific neighborhoods where you're getting a lot of pushback to develop multifamily homes?
I don't think I can single out any one community. I think most communities now we're seeing more educated and engaging community members, whether it's the community association or the neighbor next door to a proposed development. The recent upzoning to our CG as the base zone really caught everyone's attention and ruffled some feathers. And now everybody is still on high alert. So they're very aware of what that new land use zoning is doing to their communities. And they don't always see it from the development side. They see it from their perspective. And that's totally fair. So I'm seeing more educated people sharing their comments and giving feedback on projects. Sometimes it leads to appeals, and we have a process to handle those. Most of the time, though, we'll engage during the process and try to make everyone happy. It's not always possible, but we try our best to bridge that gap between community and the development.
That is quite the process to balance that line. But I do believe that the perspective that you bring, always thinking about the end user, your team in particular, are doing the right things with the community, connecting with the community, and creating places, like you said, that people want to live.
We hope so.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I know, unfortunately, my grandma's one of those people who's always submitting me appeals. Sorry about that.
We welcome her comments.
She's grown up now.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'll give you Chris's cell phone number.
Perfect. You come to dinner with us. You'll get
Perfect.
some great food. but-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
You had me at food. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Friends, what about you? Are you seeing any neighborhoods in Calgary in particular that are really standing out?
I, again, will not be mentioning the community, but I think we have one development permit application where, to be respectful for the community itself, I think their biggest issue is it's the first multifamily development in their community. So you can imagine this community or a lot of communities never, like being in a completely single family, maybe you have an apartment building over the side near the strip mall or whatever, but generally everyone lives in single family, maybe semi-detached. And then all of a sudden next to you or even a few blocks away from you, here comes this application. You see the site sign and it says, and you go, oh, probably a renovation or maybe a new home. Oh my goodness, it's a fourplex. What? Not in my neighborhood. I think in our company, there's no one that sort of feels like it's all about the industry or all about just our clients, even though they're the ones that pay our salary and keep our company going. But we do try to find that balance again between our clients and what do we want to see in that community. But we also understand that a lot of these established communities, but communities that have been mostly single family, are now seeing these applications come in, and we understand their concern. I've always wondered how I would feel if a fourplex application came in and I saw the sign go up on next to my house. Yeah, I can't even answer that question. I would probably feel the same way.
Do you believe that the community feedback and engagement in these projects is getting more contentious?
Oh, yeah, no question. Yeah, Chris said people are they're aware of the new zoning, so whether it's a community association keeping their members abreast of these applications, or people are seeing the site signs and becoming way more aware of these types of developments that they're very concerned about. Years ago, I used to live in Glendale, and I was the community planning rep. So I would get the applications, and I'd be the one reviewing them on behalf of the community. And again, I would be sitting on the fence as understanding the industry, understanding what the rights of that property owner have within the bylaws to do a single family or whatever. But it was so much simpler back then. People were doing development permits for new single family homes. Nothing ever came across my desk or whatever for review for a multifamily in Glendale. And so Glendale being one of those communities that is or was generally RC1, being single family, and then for all of a sudden, again, if you imagine 37th Street being part of Glendale, there's huge apartment buildings going up there. Things are changing, and I believe things need to change because we need more units, more rentals, more homes and places that people can live in Calgary. So many people are moving here, but we do understand how the local people, the local community members are feeling as well.
Do you think that people who have lived in Calgary for a long time see Calgary as a small city and want it to stay a small city?
I think so. Every time I hear on the radio what the population of Calgary is. I'm just, what? Have I been asleep for the last 10 years? It just blows my mind. I can't even tell you what it is at 1.5 or something. Like when I was here years ago, when I used to live in Brentwood as a kid, and Brentwood was the last community, whatever it's Northland or North Hill Mall, like there's nothing there. And same thing with when we lived down south, and Richmond was the last, everything was acreage, and now there's just development after development. So I think if you've lived in a more interstate, Killarney, for example, not to say you don't know that there's communities out there, but you can be stuck in your community and not realize how fast Calgary is growing now with not just suburbia, inner city developments as well. And yeah, the population is outrageous. Yeah. And I think in a good way, I think Calgary is moving towards being a really vibrant city. I love Calgary. I'm proud to be a citizen here and contribute to the economy here and have a business here. But there's still concerns, but I think Calgarians are entrepreneurial. We love our city. We love the outdoors. There's so many things about Calgary that we love. We have parks. We have road pathways. It's a beautiful city. And to me, I'm proud to be a part of that.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I'm originally from Toronto, but I lived in the suburbs of Toronto. And I got to see, obviously, that's a large city. And it's a large city that I would say has not been planned well. I see how Calgary is going about things, and I can see it's very different. And I do believe that Calgary has more green space. It's got more highways. It's easier to get around the cities. The communities that we develop here are smaller, but everything that you need is within your community. So it is possible to stay within your community. In Toronto, you can have full cities. Like I lived in a city called Pickering, which had, the population of Pickering was like 400,000 people. And I didn't have all the services that I need in that space. I would have to leave Pickering and go to a different place to get the services that I need. There are a lot of worse places to live. Do you think the housing crisis in Calgary and across Canada as well is making it easier or harder to advocate for multifamily homes?
I think logically it should be easier, but I also, again, back to being that family that's lived in that home in a certain community for years or even a few years, and all of a sudden an application goes or a development is proposed for the lot next to you. I understand their concerns, but I think, again, we do need to be, we're a growing city. We need to make suburbia available for people who want to own homes and can't afford, say, inner city. But we also need to be densifying the core. If you've ever been downtown, sometimes in the evenings, it's a bit scary sometimes. I think they're trying to revitalize the downtown, but that's where a vibrant, healthy city has, the core is not the only thing, but people are going down there. There's restaurants, and I know we have the core of the Beltline and parts of the city that are doing really well and are fun to go to and have those kind of activities, restaurants. Lifestyle is there, whether it's the river walks and those kind of things. But I think generally we're heading the right direction, and there is conflict between people not wanting development next to them or in their community and the need to do it, but I don't want it in my backyard mentality.
It's like the windmills.
Yeah, that's right.
Chris, how about you? Do you think the housing crisis has made it easier or harder to advocate for multi-housing?
I think it can be easier, but I think it depends on how you define housing crisis. I think there's two parts to that. I think there's affordability and availability. I think the housing crisis that most people are concerned about is the affordability. The current upzoning and the RCG and these multifamily developments, because they're new builds, typically don't contribute to the affordability factor. They contribute to the availability. And the theory behind that is more housing is available to choose from, and eventually that overstock or oversupply will affect the pricing. So generally, yeah, I think it's easy to advocate for the densification and these multifamily developments, but it's not a single fix to the general term of a housing crisis.
So you think there needs to be more work done on the affordability side to really make movement on the housing crisis?
I think affordability is a huge factor when talking about housing choices for people. I think there's more to be done on the civic level. I think there needs to be subsidies involved to create affordable housing.
And would that be like subsidies for individual families to get reduced rent or reduced purchasing price?
I'm not sure exactly how that should look. That's above my pay grade. But I do believe as a society and as a city, we should be doing more. and advocating more for the affordability factor to be addressed, whether it's through funding opportunities for nonprofits to create more housing. There are companies out there, there are nonprofits out there who are building affordable housing, but their hands are tied by the funding they receive. So I think we need to advocate louder for those types of housing options as well.
I couldn't agree more. I know the sentiment among a lot of my friends is that they'll never be able to afford a home, which is unfortunate. But if they had more options, more subsidies in place, then I think that would be accessible for them. And I think when people can afford homes, it sets them up to have more equity and have a better financial future.
Mhm.
I think if the average person in the Canadian society has a better financial future, I think Canada has a better future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like single family homes, semi-detached, row houses, affordable housing is a housing type in my opinion. So yeah, we need more of all of that.
That's really unique that you say it's its own defined housing type. And so that would be subjected to different regulations than other types of housing.
Perhaps, yeah. That is only my opinion. Not everyone believes that is an approved housing type, but that's how I feel about it.
I appreciate you sharing your opinion. Not everybody likes to do that on the internet.
I'm sure I'll regret it at some point.
We got a few more questions, but we'll speed run through these
Okay.
last ones. Sound like what?
I'll be fast.
Okay.
Let's do it.
I'm going to throw it out to whoever wants to take this one. What advice would you give to someone who is starting a multifamily project in Calgary, whether they're a builder, an investor, or a property owner? Who would like to take it?
I'll do it. Yeah, I'll start with that. I'll say, again, being on the sales side and initiating and having conversations with clients right at the beginning, I'd say if you're a do-it-yourselfer or you want to do some research on your own to start with, yeah, Chris said, check out the bylaw. So find out your zoning, your land use designation. And then once you know what it is, there's a City of Calgary has an interactive bylaw that you can go to, find that zoning, read through it, try to determine what you can do, but make sure you look at the policy as well. So there's a policy map on the City of Calgary, press all plans. You can go to the City of Calgary map, zoom in on your community, press it, and your policy will come up. And again, if you've got lots of time, there's a lot of reading there, but read through, you can get acquainted with what your lot is, what the type is, and what you're allowed to do on your property. And that, again, like Chris said, that overrides the bylaws of the zoning, and just keep that in mind. And then if you feel like we can be of help, give us a call. We can give you some advice or direction as well.
They definitely can give you some advice and direction. Hey, what advice do you have?
I'd like to add to that first. While I agree there are tons of free resources out there that the city makes available, a lot of it's legalese, and there's some finer details that are in between the lines. So I would recommend reaching out to a professional like us or someone else who has experience in this line of work and see if they can do a feasibility study, look at your property in depth, and really tell you in black and white, essentially, what you can or cannot do on that property. And I think once you have that information available, take your time. You don't want to rush. These are not cheap projects to build. So take your time, plan properly, and think about your end user again. A broken record on this, but some investors will come and say, it's a really hot rental market right now. So any door I put out there is going to get occupied, right? So we try to warn people that there's cool rental markets as well. And in a cooler market, your property might not be as desirable as others. So plan for a competitive market, take your time, think about the end user, and put together a really comprehensive project.
And I'll just add to Chris's comment about bringing in or creating your team of professionals. And I would say, I just was approached by someone a few weeks ago where they're looking to get into the market and they're looking at properties. So they were asking us for advice and we tried to give them advice. They basically have decided to move away, and I'm not sure where they're getting their advice from. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just my concern is that they came back and I asked them, where are you getting this other advice? It seemed to be in contrast to what advice we were giving them. Maybe not, this doesn't seem like the right lot. I think what happened was they went with, say, a builder or someone that, and builders are professionals. If they're qualified and they have experience, we're not builders. They have a level of experience in building that you should rely on. They're the professionals in that, but they probably shouldn't be giving advice on bylaws and policies and things like that, that we have that level of advice because we do it every day. So I would just say when you have a team of experts like designers and builders, engineers and other people in our industry like surveyors, you rely on those people within the level of experience or area of experience and expertise that they have. Don't go out and a builder says, oh, I've done a fourplex like that. I'm sure you can do it on that lot. Maybe not. Do not buy a property because someone that doesn't maybe have that expertise or is relying on a previous project a year ago or even 6 months ago. You want to be very current and make sure you're looking at the current bylaws and the current policies that may, in a positive way, affect the opportunities you have on your property or negatively affect it. And I think just pick your professional team wisely and rely on them within the area of expertise that they have.
That is great advice no matter what industry you're in. Just to wrap up here, just one final closing question. Brent, where do you see multifamily design going in the next 5 to 10 years, particularly here in Calgary?
Maybe the only comment I want to make is where we would like to see it go. And again, I think Chris alluded to a lot of these things, is that us being able to advise people to think of the end user. I think that's the biggest thing. At some point, our clients determine what the design is. Like, we're not going to tell them what to do. There's times when they go against our advice, whatever, and we still move forward relatively happily to not appease, but to provide them that service. But we really are trying to advocate for the end user. And like Chris said, for maybe a cooler market, or when people that, instead of having 10 people outside your unit coming in to rent it and we're ready to give you cash or whatever, soon that's going to be, or at some point there's going to be less people showing up, or you might have it vacant for a while. So keep that in mind and keep that renter in mind, that they want amenity space and barbecue decks and things like that, that some people are just trying to cheap out or maybe not think of. They want to maximize the unit. So I think that's our goal, is to work with people, to give them good advice, and then have them move forward with, like Chris said, intentional design that's for the end user.
Chris, do you care to build on that, where you'd like to see it go in the next 5 to 10 years?
Where I'd like to see it go, I'd like to see city planning continue to encourage densification along major transit routes and activity nodes like commercial centers. There's strip malls in almost every community that offer services that people need. Maybe we start to densify around those areas a little heavier. And with that densification comes more people into an area to support local businesses. It's more foot traffic. There's more people acting as security cameras. When there's more eyes on something, less things tend to happen. I also hope that the densification and the building of more multifamily units is recognized by the city, and we see a return investment into things like inner city schools who might be struggling with enrollment, parks, recreation facilities, even community associations who might have funding opportunities with more people in their community. So I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, and I hope that we can not just build buildings, we can build the communities around those buildings.
Very well said.
Thank you.
You guys
That's
were
awesome.
amazing. It was really interesting, just as a community member here in Calgary, to learn more about how the city's changing, how multifamily is impacting. Just to finally wrap up, if someone like myself would like to get in contact with you and either work with you or learn more about your work, how can I do that?
I would have them go to our website at beginwithdesign.com. From there, they can find past projects and see some of our single family or multifamily. And then from there, they can go to our calendar and set up a meeting online or in person with myself. And then myself or someone like Chris can do a bit of research for them, answer their questions, and make sure that it's a project they want to move forward with. And again, they can also find our contact info and give me a call or one of my staff.
Beautiful. Thank you both so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Layla.